Hello friends, I'm Samriddhi Banerjee. Welcome to my channel The Mad Reader. In this channel, I narrate the audiobooks of different popular books and stories. In this video, I'm going to narrate a few stories from a book written by the famous writer Sigrun Srivastav. This book is known as A Moment of Truth and consists of 15 beautiful short stories written by her. I'm going to read out the first 3 stories of this book. All the stories in this book are really very good, and I would recommend you to purchase this book for your book collection. You can purchase this book from Amazon, and I have provided a link in the description for the same. If you like this video, do click on the like button and do not forget to subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon. Also, share my videos to your friends and relatives. If you would like to listen to any other stories from this book, write the name of the story in the comments section. Before starting, I would be reading out the back cover of the book where something about both the book and the author is written as well as the contents of this book. In the back cover, it is written that A Moment of Truth is a collection of true stories of children from far and near England, America, Mexico, Finland, Afghanistan, Holland, Italy, Scotland, Canada, Germany, Japan, and India. Meet Ruby skating on thin ice. Will the ice hold? Does Saburo escape the deadly fangs of the shark? And why does Fanny, the faithful dog, wait at the railway station for the evening train day after day, long after his master's death? Meet these and many more fascinating characters in these poignant and gripping stories written by a storyteller of repute with a usual charm and sensitivity. Sigrun Srivastav has written over 25 books for children of all ages. An artist by profession, she regularly exhibits her sculptures in India and abroad. Her interests as an artist and a writer come together in a special picture books for preschool children. Her dramatic and powerful stories are imbued with a rare understanding of children, their hopes and dreams, their joys and fears. She has also written scripts of children films for both television and cinema. She lives in Delhi with her husband and daughter. That's all about the back cover, and now I'm going to read out the contents of this book. So here it goes. The first story is Hold On, Ruby. The second one is anybody inside? Third one, Advaya. Fourth, The Conquest of the Matterhorn. Fifth, A Moment of Truth. Sixth, The Champion. Seventh one, Larger than Life Size. Eighth one, The Bag. Ninth, The Brother. Tenth, The Hero. 11th, Lonely Sunday. 12th, Apologize. 13th, My Cousin Patricia McGee. 14th, The Miracle. 15th, In the Jaws of Death. And that's the last story. Now I'm going to recite the first story of this book, which is Hold On Ruby. So let's start. Hold on, Ruby. I didn't say a word to her all the way to Harper's Pond. When we got there, I turned to her and snapped, Okay, I've brought you with me. That's what you wanted. Now go and skate, but keep out of my way. Gosh, you're 8 years old. You should be able to take care of yourself. My sister stared up at me with those serious brown eyes of hers, now dark with hurt. Her lips quivered, but she did not cry. How I hated to be her babysitter. I left her fiddling clumsily with her skates and took off with a few powerful strokes. A line of girls swirled towards me on skates. They circled around me and came to a halt in a fine spray of powdered ice. Come on, Ruby, cried Elizabeth. You lead. Okay, I shouted. Lay on. While the others lined up behind me, I glanced back at Harriet, my sister. She was still standing where I had left her chubby face expressionless. She dug into one of the pockets of a big, shapeless overcoat, as big and as shapeless as herself, and popped a chocolate into her mouth. Why did she eat so much? No wonder she was fat. I felt ashamed of her. We shot over the ice at full speed, swinging in and out of the low hanging branches of the willow trees. We whirled in narrow sweeps around beginners on shaky legs, windmilling furiously, and then broke off in pairs and crossed over to the other side of the pond. Don't get too close to the sluice gate, cried Peggy. The ice is weak there. I did not pay attention. I was busy showing off my standard stunts. A few quick shifts, a jump, and my skates touched the ice again. Great Ruby, cried Jane as I swept backwards in a big loop away from them to get ready for my specialty, an ice scraping pirouette. Ruby, watch the sluice! I waved at Elizabeth like a celebrated film star, flashing a broad smile at her. And then it happened. It happened so fast that I couldn't even cry out. With a crack, the ice under my feet gave way. I tumbled into the chilled lake. I was drawn under and the water closed over me. Thrashing furiously, I surfaced and managed to scream, "Help!" Eyes blind with fear, I looked over to where a few moments ago my friends had been swirling about. They were all leaving. Peggy, Jane, and Elizabeth, my best friend with whom I had sworn a blood oath. We had sworn to be faithful to each other until death do us apart. "Run, the ice is breaking!" somebody shrieked. "Ruby, Ruby, she is drowning!" came another panicky voice. "Help!" I screamed. "Help!" My water soaked clothes were pulling me down. I struggled to keep my head above water clawing at the ice, but it kept breaking away. It was useless. I wouldn't make it. I was going to die. Then from deep inside me rose a cry that forced itself to my lips. "Mummy!" I cried. "Mummy!" It was not my mother who answered, but somebody big and heavy who worked her way over the ice. Pushing a branch ahead of her, she shouted, "Ruby, I'm coming!" It was Harriet, my little sister Harriet. She crawled towards me faster than anyone would have ever thought she could. Stretching out on the ice, she inched forward till the branch was within my reach and I could see her taut face behind the tangle of twigs and branches. "Grab it!" she cried. "Grab it!" In my despair, I grabbed the branch and held on to it for dear life. Treading water, I shouted, "Harriet! Harriet! You are too small! You can't get me out! Get back!" My sister shook her head slowly but with determination. Her face was ashen, her large eyes dark with fear. She was scared, I could see that. Yet she stayed on and pulled at the branch, her chubby fingers a pale pink against the dark brown stem. She pulled away with all her might. Her face turned sideways, her lips compressed tight. Around me, I could hear the ice breaking with the clinking of shattering glass. I watched the sharp cracks zigzagging towards where my sister lay sprawled flat on the ice. Water seeped in at various places and dark spots spread out menacingly. "Oh God, we would not make it out of here. Harriet! Harriet!" She looked at me and yelled something, but I could not hear her. Her face tense with fright and determination, she tugged at the branch again and again, but it did not move an inch. The ice would give way under her weight and she would die in the water like me, because of me. "Harriet! Oh, Harriet!" I struggled frantically in a bid to raise my head above ice level, trying to call out to her. I wanted to tell her so many things. Wanted to tell her that I was sorry for having been so rude to her, so absolutely nasty that I would try to make up for all the wrongs that I had done her, that I would even let her ride my bike. I wanted to tell her that I loved her and did not want her to die. But all I could do was to hold on to the branch and shriek, "Go back, Harriet, go back!" My sister shook her head. "I'm not leaving," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Not without you. Come on, Ruby. Come out! Try, oh please try! I tried desperately to push myself up, then stopped. I knew if I tried any harder, I would drag my sister too, down into the icy deep. It's no use, Harriet, I shrieked. Get back! Save your life! No, muttered Harriet. No, no, no. Then suddenly somebody shouted from behind her. Hold on, Ruby. Don't let go, Harriet. Skating towards us at full speed was Will Webster, tall and strong. Don't panic, he shouted. Don't panic. A few feet away from Harriet, he came to a halt and sprawled out on the ice. Move aside, Harriet. Let me take the branch. Slowly, girl, get back. Pushing Harriet gently to the side, he grabbed the branch with both hands. Come on, Ruby. Come out, girl. He shouted out to me. We will make it. Come on. I felt a powerful jerk, so strong that the branch almost slipped out of my hands, but I held on and pushed myself up. I thrashed my leaden legs, kicked, and kicked, pressing hard against the ice. And slowly I felt myself hauled forward and out of the deep, dark water. My chest thumped over the ice, my chin knocked against it, my legs trailed behind me, numb and useless from the cold. When I was able to lift up my head, I looked into the pale face of my sister. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, We made it! We made it! She had made it, my little sister Harriet. And now I'm going to recite the second story, Is Anybody Inside? So let's start. Is anybody inside? The old man pressed his granddaughter's face against his chest. Quiet, he whispered urgently. Don't move. If you do, we are lost. The mob came rushing down the road, hooting and shouting provocative slogans. The old man drew his arm protectively around the little girl's shoulders. Don't cry, he whispered. They will not find us here. But when he heard the tramping in front of the woodshed where they were hiding, he wasn't so sure. Someone kicked the door open. It banged against the cement wall and shook on its hinges. Framed in the open doorway, silhouetted against a red sky, stood two men. Behind them, houses burned and the sky was thick with smoke. Can you see anyone? Asked the shorter of the two. Not yet, was the reply. A torch flashed. Its beam pierced the semi darkness of the shed. The old man shrank back against the stacks of firewood, hoping that the empty drums in front would shield them from the searching light. Eyes wide with terror, he watched the light sweep over the piles of wood, then zigzag over the peeling walls. It moved up to the ceiling, plunged down, and crept slowly over the uncemented floor. Probing the piles of charcoal, drawing closer and closer, the powerful beam hit him in the eyes. Before the old man could turn his face away from the blinding light, his eyes caught the face of the tall, dark intruder. For a moment, their eyes met and held. He knew the man. He knew him very well. His neighbor's son, his friend. But that didn't seem to matter. Not now, not anymore. What mattered now was religion, to share the belief in the same God. The old man closed his eyes and turned his face away. Trapped, caught, too late to run, too late to pray, too late for anything. Time to die. Do you see anything? The shorter man pushed past. Is anybody inside? The old man held his breath. With his eyes shut, his heart thumping wildly under his sweat stained shirt, he waited. Then, after what seemed an eternity, the tall man's words reached him. They came from far away. No, let's go. There's nobody here. And the shed was plunged into darkness once again. And lastly, I am going to recite the third story of this book, Advaya. So let's start. Advaya. Tanvi says, "Forget it, Pooja," but I can't forget it. The memory of the two men hitting on the car window, rattling the door, shouting Advaya, Advaya, still haunts me. I hadn't decided whether I liked Afghanistan. I knew my father did, though he had been here for only 4 months, working as an engineer at the Khanabad irrigation project. My brother and I had stayed back in Delhi with my uncle and aunt. We had come to spend our holidays with my parents in the small town of Kunduz, not far from the Russian border. We had visited the historical place of Balk over the weekend and were on our way back when everything began to oppress me. The stillness of the wild rocky mountainside, bare of any vegetation, the ghostly craters of rocks and stones flanking the road on both sides, the dust and the heat. I felt uncomfortable. I looked at my brother sitting next to me in the car. Suddenly, he put into words what I had been thinking. "Look at this site. Isn't it a perfect hiding place for dacoits?" My mother started and shot a questioning glance at my father, who laughed softly. Without taking his eyes off the road before him, he said, "I haven't been long enough in Afghanistan to comment on that. But from what I have heard from my colleagues and experienced myself, I gather that the people of Afghanistan are rather friendly and hospitable." I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. He smiled at me and added, "Oh, don't look so frightened, Pooja. We will soon be at Tasht Kurghan, and from there it's not far to Kandaz." And to change our mood, he suggested, "Why don't you all sing a few oldies for me?" So we sang the oldies at the top of our voices in an attempt to drive the blues away, the blues and the dacoits. After the next bend, before the road began to rise, my father slowed down and brought the car to a halt on the right side. "Nothing to worry about," he assured us. "I'm checking the rear wheels." He got out of the car. We opened all the doors to let in some fresh air, but the air that entered was hot and dry. My mother picked up the flask at her feet and I wiped my forehead with my handkerchief. I wished we were back at Kandas and I could take a long cool bath. "Do you want some water, Pooja?" asked mother. I nodded and extended my hand, while my eyes travelled past her up to the road. What I saw made me drop the cup. Water spilled onto my jeans and the matting of the car. "Pooja!" scolded my mother. "Idiot!" grunted my brother. I continued to stare past my mother's surprised face at the two men rushing towards our car. The taller of the two charged at us. The other one limped behind awkwardly. Their eyes glittered menacingly from under their dirty turbans. Their ankle length black coats with long sleeves hanging at both sides flapped around them like the wings of some monstrous bird. They were coming straight at us. I shrieked and pointed at them. "Dacoits! Dacoits!" My mother turned around to stare at them, at the one swirling a stick above his head, shouting, "Advaya!" My mother shrieked again. The flask dropped from her lap. Drawing away from the window, she whispered, "Rohan! Rohan, help!" "Papa! Papa!" I shouted and flung myself across my brother in an attempt to leave the car from the opposite side. My brother pushed me back and said harshly, "Get back, Pooja! Stop acting like a fool." Then he was out of the car and calling to my father, "Papa, dacoits! They are coming straight at us. Come back! We have to leave. Start the car, Papa. Hurry, please." Sudhir banged the door shut and shouted at us, "Shut the doors! Wind up the window glass! Fast!" I pressed myself into the seat of the car, paralyzed with fear. I kept staring at the two men advancing towards the car at my side. The taller of the two had already reached the bonnet. His left hand slid over the metal and touched my mother's window. He shouted something. "Wind up your window, Ma!" I heard my brother shout. "Lock the door, Ma! You must lock the door! Bring your window up, Pooja, do you hear?" I did hear him. but his voice seemed to reach me from a distance. I wanted to move, wind up the window, but I couldn't. I just could not move. I was aware of my father squeezing himself behind the steering wheel, slamming the door shut behind him. Winding up, he shouted, "Lock the doors! Lock the doors!" He then turned the ignition key. Once, twice. The motor started. Automatically, I reached out for the handle. My hand trembled as I turned it rapidly. My eyes were fixed on the face of the man who had reached my mother's window, and I did not notice the glass moving down as I turned the handle in the wrong direction. The man thrust his hands forward. By that time, I realized my mistake and started raising the window glass. The hands were caught by the upward moving glass. He grabbed it and clung to it, trying to push it down with great force. The glass inched up slowly, painfully. When it finally reached the top, it pressed the dacoit's finger against the frame. The man yelled and withdrew his hands. He banged at the glass with his fist and hammered the door with his stick. Then he dropped it and rattled the door handle with both hands. He shouted at my mother. His words sounded like Advaya. Then from behind the furious man, the other one emerged. He threw himself at my door and tried to hit at the window pane with his fists, but there was no window pane. He hit me almost. Then, grabbing my arm, he pushed himself forward and, with his bloodshot eyes flashing at me, he roared, "Advaya! Advaya! Advaya!" I stared at him, unable to move or speak. All I could do was to stare into the dusty, bearded face and listen to the voice that shouted over and over again, "Advaya! Advaya! Latwin Mara Dawa Bitte!" He shook my arm and reached inside the car with the other hand. "Papa!" I shrieked. Then I was thrown forward against the back of the front seat and bounced back again. The dacoit was jerked forward. He released my arm but hung on to the window. As the car gathered speed, he fell into a run beside it, still holding onto the window frame with his left hand. His dirty face bobbed up and down as he kept on running and shouting, "Advaya, Advaya, Advaya," over and over again. And then his hands were gone. His hands, his face, and his voice. Our car sped along the unmetalled road, leaving behind a cloud of dust. I did not turn to look back, but Sudhir did. He cried excitedly, "We licked them! We shook them off, Pa! Wow!" Then he looked at me disdainfully. "How dumb can you get, Pooja? Don't you know how to raise a window glass?" "Stop picking on her," murmured my father. "These things do happen in such moments." "But the dacoit almost got her by the throat," shouted my brother. "He did not," I protested weakly. "Well, if he had had time to pull out his knife, Sudhir, please," pleaded my mother. "Will you please stop that? Let's thank God that we are all safe." "Okay," mumbled my brother and shot a last disdainful glance at me. He looked out of the window and then shook his head once more and cried, "We licked them, Papa. You were great. You got the car started in a few seconds." Those seconds had seemed an eternity to me. "These guys," continued my brother, "were out to get our watches and Ma's chain, but we shook them off. We licked them." Sudhir clapped his hands gleefully. But I wasn't pleased at all. I was on the verge of crying as I fought the voice still running through my head. "Advaya! Advaya!" "Pa," I said finally, after we had had our dinner, "I would like to look up the word Advaya. I wonder what it means." "It means hands up," stated my brother, taking the last spoonful of kheer. "Or I'll kill you." "Or Sudhir," pleaded my mother. My father returned from the bedroom with a thick dictionary. It did not take him long to find the word, but it took him almost a minute to read it. His face was pale and his eyes looked troubled as he said in a flat voice, "Advaya means medicine." For a long time no one spoke. Then my mother whispered, "Oh my God, oh my God," over and over again. I stared at her and at my brother and did what I wanted to do all afternoon. I began to cry. So that's all for this video. Thank you.